Welcome to Recross the Paths, where we celebrate the Cube community one conversation at a time. Today, I am joined by yoloswagb0i. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
I'm always excited to sit down and talk Cube, and I've enjoyed exploring your primary project and also just hearing about some of the things you're doing in your local community and some of your experience drafting. So I'm just really excited to sit down and chat here. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, before we dive into too many specifics, Yolo, why Cube? Why is this a pursuit that you're interested in?
I think the reasons have changed over the years. When I first got into Cube, I had kind of returned to playing Magic. I used to play standard competitively and limited a lot around like Amonkhet to Dominaria kind of time and just fell off. I'd come back a few years ago and was playing a lot of Commander with a local group of friends. And my favorite part of Commander was building decks and, just kind of fiddling with card lists. And when the idea of Cube came up, it was just a bigger list of cards that I got to play around with and design. I spent a lot of time, more or less, in a spreadsheet just putting cards together, and that was a ton of fun. When it actually came time to build it and start playing it, that became something different where trying to get a lot better at drafting was my primary focus. And these days, it has really turned into something where I'm excited about seeing my local community grow and come together and support people on giving them something to do on Tuesday nights and coming in and seeing what other people have built and get to be excited about drafting their projects. That's what I'm really excited about these days is the community and being able to support people in their creative endeavors.
Yeah, what did you find was helpful for you in moving from that theory to the actual building side of design?
It was definitely a push by one of my friends, actually, who had just gotten into Magic, and I was just talking to them about this list of cards, and they were like, well, I'm going to put in a big order of cards to build this commander deck. Why don't I just add some cards onto that for you? And I truly think, had they not offered that, I might have a completely different set of primary hobbies these days. My life might look very different. I might have just gotten interested in something else and left this idea of cube in theory. So
That's amazing.
a little push from a friend really changed the last few years of my life.
That's awesome. So by saving shipping costs, friends have brought you down a completely different path.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that so many different things in my life have probably come down to that kind of like random chance, but it's definitely turned me into someone who I try to say yes a lot more to wild ideas that I have or that other people have because I have seen so many positive things from just like trying something new. Recently, it was Christmas and I bought me and my mom a pottery class to go to together, and I really enjoyed it. My mom had fun. I really enjoyed it, and now I've signed up for a multi-week course with that same pottery studio, and I'm really excited to get into that.
That's really exciting. So like I got you this gift for you, but it turns out I actually liked this a whole lot.
Yeah.
Well, kind of speaking in that vein of things that turns out you enjoy, your primary cube, the aptly named yoloswagcube, this is the thing that I imagine kind of embodies your engagement with the game. Would you mind giving us an overview for this project?
Yeah, so let's start off first. The name is yoloswagb0i's Yoloswagcube, and I
Ah,
named it
sorry. Yeah,
that
yeah.
because we have like Caleb Gannon's Powered Synergy Cube, LSV's Vintage Cube. I figure that my name adds a lot to the authenticity of this.
That's
The
right. That's
joke
right.
there being that I have a name worth adding to projects like this. Um, this is actually my only cube. I've delved a little bit theory wise, but this has been something that I've just kind of spent the last few years really tinkering with and, trying to bring into a place that I really like. It's one of them fair cubes that's kind of, looking at the aggro mid-range to control spectrum, and it's kind of like a powered up master set, and it's focused on like elegant design and
We've
all
heard some of
those
these
kind of.
sentiments. Yeah.
Yeah, you've probably heard sentiments like this before in the cube community.
That's not a bad thing. It's just familiar.
Yeah. It's really a cube where you're going to see a lot of like the kind of cube all-stars. There's kind of this homogenizing effect that you can sometimes see with cubes online where someone will play a cube and it'll have this really cool card in it and you're like, I had so much fun playing with that card.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it in my cube.
Right.
And I have a really good example of that where this last summer I went up to the Inland Northwest Cube Fest with DSB, Joe Donkey, and our friend Floozy. And I think all four of us played with the card Scrawling Crawler for the first time.
Yeah.
And when we came down, all four of us independently put that into a cube and started playing with it because that card rules. Card of the year of 2024, Scrawling Crawler.
Turns out people draw cards a lot.
That's what I've heard. But a lot of people, particularly in my local community, have really tried to eschew this kind of like homogenizing effect and have really built projects that are a lot more independent and creative. That's kind of given me license to just have the cube in our community that plays all of these cube all stars, and it's great. I mean, there's definitely little tweaks and things that have my personal seal of approval on there. I don't know anyone else that's running seal of strength in a fairly high powered environment,
Sure.
but it's something that I'm really happy with. Like I said, I used to play a lot of standard and a lot of one-on-one limited, and when I got into playing Commander, I think what I really missed was this very competitive 1v1 magic, and I was happy
Mm.
to build an environment that allowed for that. And I also do like the kind of like big weird old combos that you can sometimes see in Commander or sometimes come up in like the Magic Online Vintage Cube, but I really wanted to focus on something that was a lot more limited in nature and had a lot more of that feeling of like just playing to the board and making these little decisions over the course of the game that were going to build up your advantage rather than just working towards like one big combo.
Yeah. Like, how do you balance that kind of idea of a lot of these familiar cards that play in a way that people expect with adding fresh cards to the mix, like trying new things?
I used to be a lot more precious with my additions and changes to the cube. I used to try and be very balanced with it. These days, I realize that like making big changes, there's not a big cost to it because I can always just take the cards out or put the cards in that are, problems or aren't really meeting my design goals. And I have enough people willing to play this that I can make a big shift to the cube and get feedback pretty quickly. Like I recently wanted to try something new with the lands, and I was for a long time running this like double fetch triple shock package that was I think kind of made famous by Andy Mangold. But I wanted to try out the triomes and having a lot of prismatic vistas so that you weren't being able to fetch up these like super powerful cards, but it was still fixing. I did that for a few drafts, ended up not really liking it, and have now gone back to the double fetch and now double shock, single surveil mana base. For a long time, I didn't have any tokens in this cube, and
Kind of that bar cube sensibility of no tokens sort of thing.
yeah, which the reason that I did that actually was when we first started playing at our local store. I don't think we were really efficient in how we were drafting and building and playing games. And we would often get to the time the store's closing and we've done like 2 rounds. I was like, well, if I just have less tokens and less things on the board that people have to like remember, that'll just make it a lot quicker for us. And it did.
There's actually some truth to that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now we're a lot more efficient, and I feel a lot better about actually having some of these. The bonus to that is that every card that makes tokens now is in there for a big reason, and it's a card that I really like. It had to pass a pretty high bar to make tokens and be included in the cube.
That is kind of funny to think about evaluating a card from will this cause the game store to have to stay open late for us? Or like, will this keep us from finishing rounds?
Fully, and that was also why like there used to be a lot more cards that were like very complex, and we were playing with a lot of people that didn't have a lot of experience playing Magic and would have to read cards for a very long time before figuring it out. And then you look at a card like Monastery Swiftspear and it's like, okay, haste prowess, I got it, cool. I know
Yeah,
what that does.
like a sigh of relief.
Yeah, now enough people, are more familiar with a lot of these cards. I can add in something like Ella Damry Corvectol. That card's got 3 paragraphs on it. It's ridiculous. I never remember what it does until I see it in a pack, but I have a little bit more license to add in something weird like that.
With some of the things that are already familiar and established for you, what would cause you to make changes to a cube like this?
These days, it's just typically if I just hear about a card that's cool that I like, like I said, I used to be very precious with this and I would want to have a certain density of every kind of effect. And that's broadly true for how I design this these days. I want to have so many removal spells, like of a percentage, but I can't keep up with the releases of cards. I don't know if you've experienced this or you've heard of this, but Wizards has been releasing a lot of cards lately.
It is a lot of
And
cards. Yeah.
I can't do it. I don't set aside time to like take a look at all of the new cards or something, which is great because then I can have the experience of, just seeing something new in someone's cube or, on the very few times that I play Commander these days, or, I'll listen to a podcast and they'll talk about a card and I'll think, oh, that's cool. I'm going to put that in my cube. And that's how Sky Hussar is now in my in my cube after being featured on Lucky Paper like, a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's either that or you were going back to some old legacy videos when Sky Hussar was playable there.
I do that. Sometimes I'll find myself putting on something in the background while I'm doing something and I'll realize I'm watching Commander video from like 6 years ago. And
Yeah.
that's great. I have a lot of nostalgia for that time.
It's interesting. This echoes some of what it sounds like Richard Garfield's original intents were for some of how Magic would play, where you wouldn't have a full list of all the cards. You wouldn't have a sense of what everything looks like, and you would see a card in a friend's deck, or you would see somebody else play something and then go, oh, cool, I need to figure out either how to get that or how to beat that. So I'm just hearing little echoes of that in this description of like, I can't keep up with everything, so I'm just going to latch on to these cool things that I've not seen before.
Yeah, it's allows me this kind of constant element of discovery, which is great. Like I said, so much of my experience now is seeing what lists other people have put together and if they either build something with a really weird context or add some really weird rule that necessitates a certain kind of card. I often get to see something that I've never seen before, which I'm very happy about.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you recently updated yoloswagb0i's yoloswagcube from a 360 to 450.
Yes, that was a pretty weird experience. I did that because we would start getting more than 8 people coming to our cube nights, which was incredible. And then we were getting more than, 16 people coming to our cube nights. And I wanted to just have something on offer that could accommodate a few more people. But I had felt like I had really dialed in where I liked this cube at 360. And when I tried bumping that up to 450, I felt like it kind of lost something, like lost some amount of identity. Felt like a lot of cards were just there to be space fillers. And
Hmm.
it's been a very difficult road getting it to be something that I really like. I actually just made an update a few days ago after, kind of working on it in the background for a little while. And I feel like it's really at a point that I resonate a lot with it. I've added a ton of cards and then went through and did like a Marie Kondo of like, does this spark joy on like every single card, and just cut out everything that I didn't like or felt didn't fit my kind of nebulous design goals. And I'm really happy with where it's at, but it's definitely shifted a few things of the feeling. My cube's a pretty high power level, and there's like certain removal spells that just kind of don't hang. So the density of like instants and sorceries in a lot of the colors is just a lot different than it was at 360. There's a lot more creatures that fit my design goals. So it's bumped up from, I think, like 35% creatures to about 50% now.
Wow. Yeah.
It plays a little bit differently. Things are a little bit less consistent, which I'm actually okay with. It got to a point where everything was like so tuned and so balanced that it felt a little bit boring. I can remember one draft in particular where every single design goal of like these, very elegantly designed cards and smooth gameplay happened, but it just felt like there was no tension. And that's when I started feeling a little bit better about adding in these like big power outliers. And we would talk a lot in rock lingo about this. And I was mentioning how it felt like it had smoothed out too much and I wanted to add some rough edges back onto it. And I really like it, with those rough edges. It adds a little bit of inconsistency. It just makes things a little bit different every single time you go in to draft, which I really like.
And you're currently on full singleton, right? Aside from your mana base that you mentioned, did you consider breaking singleton for anything?
I've thought about it, but there's so many like cool cards, and there are cards that fulfill a similar role, but are a little bit different. Like I look at Blood Artist versus Ron Executioner Thane,
Mm-hmm.
which Ron can make an opponent lose 2 life and you gain 2 life, but it only happens once each turn. And just having that out on the field versus Blood Artist makes you play a little bit differently and makes you, maybe attack more rather than trying to build up this engine. I really like that. And I think that there's something to be said for that. I could obviously have Llanowar elves and Elvish Mystic and Fintorn elves, but to me, those are exactly the same card, just with a different name.
Yeah.
So I have Llanowar elves and Avacyn's Pilgrim and Elves of Deep Shadow, which will do different things in different situations, and maybe something weird will come up.
Well, and that's the hope. It sounds like pushing people to novel experiences.
That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
I do want to commend Yolo your work on your overview. I know many folks have these sprawling pages of many, many details and ideas. I think you're condensed down to just a few sentences, and honestly, covers a lot of what you need to know. One of the things you wrote there is there's no specific theme or restrictions. This is just a lovingly crafted and eternally evolving environment. In the beauty of simplicity there, I was going to ask, does having no clear theme like that make it tougher to get buy-in from your potential drafters?
No, not really. I think that a lot of people are very excited about these different cubes that are on offer. Oftentimes, we're running 2 full pods, sometimes more or less, on one of them. But if people are really interested in trying something novel and new, there's almost certainly someone there that wants to do that. I think that sometimes having a cube that's just like, these are just cards I like, this plays in this certain way, is kind of a breath of fresh air for some people where they want to come to Cube Night, they want to play Magic and have fun, but they don't want to have to feel like they have to think too hard
Mm.
or anything like that, which sometimes I am. I feel like I'm very like smooth brained when it comes to magic, and sometimes I'm in these novel environments and feel very out of my depth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing to have a simple hook.
Yeah, typically we'll often have, one or two new people come to every cube night, and we'll be describing the different cubes that are on offer. And we almost always just let the new people kind of choose where they want to go, and then we'll fill in as needed. And we usually will describe the different cubes and then tell them, so this one's really complex, this one's really simple and dumb. Go where you want.
Well, I think, Yolo, you've mentioned this a few times here, so worth unpacking. You said now with your cube group. It sounds like your local community's undergone some pretty significant change over the last year or so.
Yeah, I was looking back before the show at when we started meeting up, and we started having a monthly cube night at our local game store in the summer of 2023. And I think we did that like twice before a few of us said, hey, we just want to do this every single week, and started just showing up every Tuesday. For a long time, though, it was just a few of us. It was like 3, maybe 4 for months, like a year maybe. I think that we were consistently getting like 6 people once we had been playing together for about a year. And sitting there with that consistency, it eventually blossomed into something that was a lot bigger than itself. We had people that were willing to commit and be there every single time. And eventually, people started seeing us there every week. And we would post in our local game store's Discord, just saying, like, hey, if you want to come and play Cube with us, play Magic, not have to bring anything, we started seeing people who would hear about us and want to show up and play Magic. Eventually, without us asking, our local game store just added. We hadn't been doing things under the local game stores like monthly. We're running a cube night for a while. We just kind of took it into our own hands, and we were just sitting in the back of the shop trying to stay out of their way for a long time. Without us asking, they just added weekly cube night to their big advertising board at the front of the store and added it
Awesome.
onto their Discord. Someone called in once and asked them, hey, is there any events going on tonight? I'm new in town. I haven't done anything. They're like, well, people are playing cubes, so you should come and do that. And they've been wildly accommodating to us, which is great because I thought that we were actually like bothering them by taking up space in their store every single week and not having people pay their store money to come and play with us.
Well, that's so encouraging to hear that they're on board with that.
Yeah, it's been really nice. And I think they like having people in the store. They like having reasons for people to walk through the doors. And it helps that everyone that we play with is very nice. And there's a lot of laughs always coming from that side of the room.
That is important, curating the vibes, as I've heard somebody describe it. So, what did you do during those lean days, or I guess if you want to call them that, like when you only had a couple of people showing up? How did you play then?
We often tried different kinds of draft formats like grid draft or houseman draft is, one of my favorites. If we would get 6 people, then we would often do like burn drafts, different things like that. I think we had probably been playing together like a year and a half before I ever had a full 8-person draft of my cube, which was great. But it really allowed us to the invested people to talk about our cube design and try out these different things. A big thing that kind of shifted our local community was when we did our first rotisserie draft.
Hmm.
Anthony Maddox put together a really nice rotisserie draft Google sheet. Thank you, Anthony, for putting that together. I wanted to do it with my cube, and we had about 6 people that were really invested. So I got all 6 of those to agree to buy into this and made a small Discord for it. We played it, and then we just kept the Discord going, and people would come and play with us, and we'd say, "Hey, you should join our Discord." And now there are people joining that Discord all the time because their friends play with us or something. And I oftentimes don't know who any of these people are, but we have places that people can post their decks. We have places people can work on their different formats locally. And it's become something really great to be able to just chat with members of my local community in this Discord about Cube and all hype each other up for when we're going to see each other on Tuesday and come together and play. Doing that rotisserie draft really solidified all of the regulars into feeling like we actually had a community, and that allowed us to bring people into that community.
That's pretty incredible. And I think even something like rotisserie, which, in case folks don't know, is usually you're drafting the entire cube face up functionally, so picking one card at a time from the complete list. Like, people often shy away from that because of its complexity, and so I think it's kind of neat that something like that is part of what helped that group congeal into what it is.
Yeah, and I think a big part too is we did that asynchronously over the course of, a couple weeks where we were just chatting about it the whole time and trash talking and that kind of stuff.
That's a required part of it for sure.
It's the best part of it. It's so great.
I do have to note one of the first times I got to meet Roja was in a rotisserie draft, and so our first experience was cutting each other off of Jund. And so then getting to meet a person after that is like, well, we already have this established history of how grumpy we were for taking each other's picks.
Yeah, I remember this particular experience where we were doing this, and I was gonna ask people to write up their experience about it afterwards because we were drafting my cube. And DSB was sending me all of these thoughts, and he was talking about how he was thinking about taking this one card to cut Joe Donkey off of it. And I felt really bad because I was like, oh, dude, don't tell me that because I was definitely thinking about stealing that from you out from under you. um, he got to it before me, actually, but it was this very funny experience that people always jumping into other people's lanes and, trying to outsmart everyone else. I remember someone took Territorial Kavu from me the turn before I was going to take it, and I felt so bamboozled. It's such a great experience.
It has that energy of the like mid 2000s reality show, where it's like there's all these alliances and secrets, and like, well, you could about record a show that way of people talking into the camera of like, I can't believe Yolo took this from me. This was mine by birthright.
I would watch that so hard. Reality shows are like my secret, not really guilty pleasure, but not a lot of people that I hang out with watch them, so I can't often talk about, the latest episode of Survivor or the Traders, but I would definitely watch a cube themed reality show.
We'll make some notes. We'll see what happens.
One of these times at CubeCon, someone will be willing to put together some weird creative project.
Well, one of the things you mentioned with with this whole project was kind of the consistency of meeting week to week. I know that may not be profound in its concept, but can you speak some to that, like the value of just being present every week?
I think that doing things on a weekly time scale is actually a lot bigger of a deal than a lot of people think when it comes to like building community. I've talked to people on like the Cube Talk Discord about how we've been able to put together this, weekly thing. And sometimes people will note how difficult it is to get together week to week, and they'll try and do things like monthly or every 2 weeks, and that's understandable. Everyone's busy. We have to fit this into other aspects of our lives, but when you have something happening weekly where people know that they can just show up at this local game store at this time and there will be people to play Magic with them, it really gives them like a sense of freedom to be able to like kind of jump in and jump out in a way that I think having things on a monthly, or if they have to organize with people and get 8 people to agree to show up at this singular time, the less steps that you put in front of someone, the easier it is that they'll buy into it, you know?
Hmm.
And that's allowed us to, meet people who can only come every 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but because they know that we'll be there if they have like this very inconsistent work schedule, when they do show up, we're always happy to see them. It's been really important. And also, what's nice is the people that I've gotten to know through this, like, we're friends and we really enjoy each other's company. So getting together when there was three of us, four of us, it was still really fun. And we were able to just chat and have fun together, which is really what it's about. That's the primary thing for me, is the community that we've built, and having games to play kind of greases the wheels of that like social interaction. That's
Yeah.
never been a area of my life that I've felt particularly competent or comfortable in, but having this like shared activity to do has really opened a lot of doors for that.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, where in some ways it develops where you are the friends or acquaintances first, and then the game is just kind of there as something you get to do while you're being friends.
Yeah, and there's certainly like the context to it. I mean, we have often, as a group, gone and done different things, gone rock hounding. Joe and DSB took me morel hunting for my first time with their family. And we've had, members of our group that aren't really interested in that. They're interested in having that friendship kind of be centered around our weekly cube nights, or, if we see each other at pre-release. And that's great too. Not every relationship has to be the same, but it's been really nice to be able to have all these people that I'm always really happy to see and happy to meet. It's been a very beautiful thing.
Do you find that it takes particular effort to maintain the ethos of a group like that you're after?
I think so. And we have been very intentional about that. We are a very progressive leftist community. And we've had conversations about, like, we're playing in a public space. What do we do when someone shows up with differing ideas or outward presentation? And I'm usually one to jump to like being very antagonistic. I've been very happy to have people that have taught me to be a little bit more patient. We've had people show up and maybe make some, kind of suspect comments, but nothing really overt. And if we need to, we've been pretty direct with, hey, this is kind of how we interact here. But a lot more, we've just been very positive about being inclusive and progressive and queer and punk. And then we've had people who used to come in and kind of say these weird things come in and not say these weird things and not bring out their explicit playmat anymore. It's been something that I think that we continue to try and have conversations about as the more invested people in the community.
Well, I think it's encouraging to hear that even if you and as you encounter folks that may disagree with some of what you hold to, that it sounds like you're still creating a space where people can come in and enjoy the game and enjoy the community beyond that.
Yeah, and we want to be people who people see us having fun being this like very inclusive group. Maybe they might also want to be inclusive as well.
Well, Yolo, one other thing I wanted to make sure that we chatted about a little bit was that you have done 44 cube drafts in paper in 2025, which sounds like quite an accomplishment from my perspective. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like how did that happen and what led to that?
I think that 44 cube drafts probably doesn't put me in like the upper echelon of cube drafters. I'm pretty sure Joe Anderson said something about like being at like 150 cube drafts for a year or something, and that seems incredible to me. But I have made it a priority in my life to be able to get in these different cube drafts. Now, it's also been hard to make it to cube night every week, particularly this last year, because I entered into a new profession and that's been pretty demanding on my time. I've also been able to do these on the weekends. Sometimes people will want to get together for these like exhibition cubes, or sometimes I'll just be like really wanting to draft a cube that we haven't drafted in a while. And oftentimes, the people that own those cubes are usually working on some other kind of creative project. And that's what they want to present to Cube Night when it's their time to come up and present something. So I'll ask, like, hey, how about we get together and draft X cube on this Saturday? And we'll get people together. I've posted all my deck lists on Blue Sky, and I intend to do that again this coming year. I think that's also something that really made me actually try and count and want to be even more present, as I was having a lot of fun just like reflecting on every deck that I drafted and writing up a very brief presentation of that. And that's been fun to also like look back on over the last year. There were a couple times where I was able to draft a lot in a short span of time. Like when I went up to Inland Northwest Cube Fest, I drafted 5 times in a weekend and was able
Yeah.
to supplement all of those times I missed out on our weekly cube night with them. I've been sick these last 2 cube nights, so I'm getting kind of a late start this year, but hopefully I'll have a lot more to add on.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned your social media posts too. I think that was something that was really encouraging to me as I was reading through those, is that it looks like you just have a really consistently positive outlook in spite of your records or in spite of experiences in the draft. Have you found a trick to that, or is that just like this is the joy of cubing, that no matter what happens, you're gonna have a good time?
I think it is a bit more intentional. I have made it a point that I don't really care whether I win or lose at a game. I care about things that winning often comes with. Like, I care about performing well and trying to make positive plays and improving. But I'm also not the best player. And I truly, if I'm playing well, I really don't care if I win or lose. And I've also wanted to make it a point to be a gracious opponent. I don't want to be like angle shooting and trying to win at all costs. I want people to have fun playing against me, and I want people to come back. And it's a lot more fun to be a gracious opponent than it is to be someone who's always concerned with, like, is my deck performing well? Am I winning? Am I not losing? It really doesn't come into my mind. I do, try and keep somewhat of a record just to see how I'm doing, see if I'm getting better over the course of the year. I think I am getting better, but I think I am still pretty far from what I would consider like a good player. But it all kind of comes together, and it is a pretty intentional thing to try and have fun. Go into it with the expectation that, like, win or lose, I'll do my best and have fun regardless.
Well, it's really come through with how you've shared so far too, that success is more than just an outcome of a game.
Yeah, it's all of these different things that we get out of Cube Night, out of, having fun, looking at other people's lists and chatting and while we're drafting and trash talking a little bit. You got to be tactful when you're doing that, but it is always fun to kind of like poke fun at people as long as everyone's having a good time doing it.
Do you have a goal of like trying to match that number, or is the number less important? Like, what are you aiming for in the year ahead?
I would certainly like to try and match that number. As I said, my career has kind of taken off and it's looking to be quite a bit more demanding this year in some different ways, which are positive, but that might just mean that I have to do a little bit more to try and organize these different exhibition drafts on the side and try and be a little bit more involved, maybe sleep a little bit less in order to actually stay up for cube night. But I also just want to have a lot of fun and be able to be involved and keep our cube community growing. I think showing up as often as I can is important to that. And I've had to take on a lot less of a leadership role this last year in order
Mm.
to keep it going. It's become a much more self sustaining thing. And I'm happy to just be someone that's able to just show up and play Cube just like everyone else, which has been really nice. So we'll see. Let's see if I can make 44 this year. Maybe 45 is a good goal to shoot for.
Yeah, here's hoping. Just a little better than last time.
Yeah.
I know it's impossible to encapsulate that much time in a single thought, but do you have any particular takeaways from so many experiences there at the table?
I think that a lot of people's favorite part of the night is drafting. And if they could just draft again and again and never play games, that would be their favorite thing. I really want to draft decks that I'm excited to play. And I think that a lot of people in my community, we've talked about this, where when we design our cubes, we want people to be more excited about playing their games than they were about just building their deck. And I think that that's a pretty small ethos and is hard to actually put into like concrete terms when you're putting your cube list together. But it's something that's always in the back of my mind when I'm designing. And I think that it's in the back of mind for a lot of people in my local community when they're designing. So that makes for really fun nights. We put in cards that are fun to lose to, and it also is kind of an attitude that you bring to every cube night where you are excited to see what your opponent's deck is going to do and you're excited about how am I going to play against this particular card. It's kind of a rambly, weird answer, but I would
No, no,
say
no.
that when you're designing, you should think about how is this actually going to end up playing at the table. And that's going to impact a lot of the decisions that you make. And when you actually do your first draft of a new cube, you'll get reps in at seeing how those design decisions actually end up when you're sitting down and playing.
Oh, I like that a lot. That reminds me some of the. I forget where I heard the sentiment first, but the idea that the person sitting across from you at the table is your opponent and not your enemy.
Yes.
I feel like you get to enjoy some camaraderie there, even in a competitive game.
Yeah, where we both have similar goals. We both want to win, but we also have the same goal of we both want to have fun.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Yolo, I usually like to ask in kind of summary of a conversation here, what advice would you want to share with other designers as they're considering their own projects?
I think that my advice would definitely be different now than it was when I first started. I used to be so focused on getting certain densities of effects and trying to be very precious with things. And these days I'm much more focused on like just play with the cards that you like. There are a lot of cards that might not fit the power level of an environment or might be kind of wild and weird and not really do everything that your stated design goals are. But if you want to play with them, stick them in your cube, see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm ever going to take Luris out of my cube, even though that's like a absolutely wildly powerful card. I stuck Approach of the Second Sun in as like one of the very first cards ever when I was designing a cube. And almost every single week someone wants to play with that card, and I love it. And it's a weird card and very often doesn't win, but it makes people want to play it and I love it. So yeah, just play with the cards that you like, and I think everything else kind of comes secondary to that.
That's great. I love it.
I wanted to talk about this one time. My friend Joe Donkey has this cube alternate timeline, and it was the very first cube that we drafted at our local cube night. And there was this card in there, Blood Cultist, which is kind of a dinky card. It's not super powerful, but I stuck it in my deck and I had so much fun with it. And Joe was making these big update to his cube and taking out a lot of these multicolored cards, and he took out Blood Cultist, and I kind of had this like emotional reaction to it. We were out on a hike once, and I asked him, like, just very briefly, like, hey, could you put this card back in for me? And he said, sure, and stuck it in. And I wanted to highlight that for two reasons. One is to talk about just what an awesome guy Joe is. He's great, probably like the most considerate person I've ever met. But then also, I think it really highlights that Cube is kind of a community thing. When I'm designing, I'm thinking about people in my local playgroup. How are they going to enjoy these cards? Is there something that someone really, really, really hates playing against and is going to have an emotional reaction to that's negative? Is there a card that someone really, really, really likes and is going to be excited about playing? I've put plenty of cards in for one particular person.
Mm.
And I think that that kind of community ethos while you're building your cube is like really important. And it was really important to me to have that card in the cube. I've since kind of told Joe, now that it's been a while, like, hey, I don't think this card really hangs anymore, and you can feel free to take that out. But it was very nice of him to stick it back in for me.
That's so good. Yeah, what an emblematic experience of like the best of the cube culture, right? Like of how people engage with one another.
Yeah, it's been great.
Well, and I had the opportunity to sit down with Joe a number of episodes ago now, but yeah, great conversation. Joe's a neat guy.
Yeah, I listened to that episode in preparation for this. I was like, okay, let's see.
That's excellent. Well, Yolo, as we are trending toward wrapping up here, I do get to ask you one of my favorite questions, which is if you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick and who would you have do the illustration?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and the card that immediately came to mind was the card Frogmite, which
Yeah.
4 mana, 2/2 artifact creature. It has affinity for artifacts. I think this card is super, super cool, but it was done by, famously canceled artist Therese Nielsen. And I was like, I would love for there to be a printing of this that was done by someone else. There actually was. There was a special guest done for Bloomborough by Mike Sass, which is very nice. Not exactly my style, but I'm still choosing Frogmite. And the artist that I would want is DSB, who is one, my friend, and I love this man, so I'd love to see him design a magic card. But also, DSB designed this environment called Nearby Planet, which is kind of this weird
Yeah.
battle box that you draft your opening hand from. And he wrote this story to go along with it that cited these three frogs, which are emblematic of frogs in the cube of Poison Dart Frog, Yargle, and I think the card Frogify. And they were the characters in this story. And he drew these kind of weirdly anthropomorphic, like frog goblin things to go along with it that were super cool looking. And I would just love to see what he does with this weird frog artifact in that kind of style. I think that would be my favorite card to ever have, is if he did that.
That's so good. You know, my first experience meeting DSB, he was crouched on the floor of an Airbnb with some folks after an evening of CubeCon, sketching out. I'm trying to remember what I think he was doing additional artwork on somebody's somebody's art piece. So that was my first experience with him, was doing artwork that way. So this is a charming answer.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like him. I've had a number of experiences with DSP like that, where or I'll be over at his house and he'll be pulling out like weird old art that his grandfather did, and it's always a pleasure doing something weird and creative with that man.
Absolutely. Well, in the same spirit, it has been a pleasure to do this with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to share so much about your projects and your passion for your local community. It's really encouraging. If folks want to follow up with you, maybe want to follow up more on Yolo Swag Boys, Yolo Swag Cube, or just want to see some of what else you're working on, where should we point them?
Well, I hang out in the Cube Talk Discord. I'm yoloswagb0i on Discord. You can also find me on Blue Sky. I will be posting all of the deck picks that I draft this coming year and hopefully forever or until the inevitable downfall of Blue Sky. Feel free to ping me on anything whenever you want to chat. I'm desperate for social communication, so yeah.
And it sounds like if people show up on, is it Tuesday nights now, they ought to just show up and draft Cube.
Yeah, if you're ever in the local Boise metro area, you can show up at ABU Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. and play Cube with us. That would be awesome.
Sweet. Well, truly, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and be a part of the program. This has been so much fun for me, and I'm looking forward to more opportunities to connect in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.